Welcome back to the Yellow Room podcast, where it's all about positivity and empowering you to become the very best version of yourself. I'm Nika, the host of this podcast, and I'm so ecstatic that you tuned in for yet another powerful topic intended to empower you. Thank you. Before we get into today's episode, I want you all to hear from one of our fellow Yellow Room family members about how this podcast has been life-changing for her.
Every morning I listen to the Yellow Room podcast, and every morning it is a mirror placed in my face. I love this podcast. I mean, just the way she delivers her message, her tone, and the way you can tell Nika is filled with compassion, and every message that she puts out there is speaking to me. There's not one day she puts a message out that she's not talking to me, and it gives me hope and it gives me strength to want to do better, to fight and be better in my walk with Christ. I love this podcast. I look forward to hearing it. I have it saved to my phone on my iPhone. I just love it. And I pray that she continues to reach thousands and even nations. Amazing podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Yellow Room. Today's episode is entitled Life Cleanse. As fall is approaching, the warm weather is going away, cooler weather is starting to set in, and I'm loving it. And I love pumpkin spice, and it's everywhere. It's in candles, it's in donuts, it's in coffee, all the bad stuff I shouldn't be eating, but I love it. Anyway, I kind of wanted to facilitate some thoughts and conversation around like some general housekeeping, but I wanted to take it a step further and talk about like how we can cleanse our soul, our mind, body, and souls. For me, anytime the season change, I like to do like a deep home cleanse. So I'm getting rid of clothes that I don't necessarily need. I'm pulling out like last fall, last winter clothing, and sadly I can't fit a lot of that stuff. So I'm just kind of like getting rid of things and making room for like new clothes that I can purchase. I shouldn't be shopping, but doing the cleaning, all of that good stuff, just making room for things in the new season. I know for many of my friends, they go through seasonal depression, especially with the cold weather coming up. So I just wanted to take some time to talk to you all about how you can, unclog your life just to make way and prepare for the upcoming season. And with us only having how many more months? 3 more months of the year, how we can kind of like reevaluate some things, evaluate how effective some of our choices and our methods and different strategies for goals that we set out to do at the beginning of this year. Did they work? Did they not work? And I know some people, they kind of lose that momentum and the passion that they have at the beginning of a year. They lose it towards the end. So I just wanted to kind of I want this episode to be like a positive mind shift for you all to kind of, close out 2019 on a great foot and start 2020 with your best foot forward. So I really hope that you all are inspired by today's message, and I hope that it'll provide a great framework for you all to close out the year and just be the very best person that you can be. So as I've been cleaning out my closets and kind of making way for new fall pieces and some pieces that I can still wear from last year, which are very few, but I'm going to get in the gym eventually. But anyway, as I was doing that today, I thought that, it's the same thing needs to happen in my spiritual life. So I need to do some cleaning in my spiritual closet. And I started to think about all the times where, I don't know if you all can relate to this, but like just on those days where you want to spend time with God, you want to pray a little more, you want to just be still and quiet and just hear from him for whatever it is that he has to say. But your mind is just boggled down with a million other things. And it's just like you can't really sit still long enough to really hear from God. Like, I know that for many of us, like we get in those situations and we just forget about God altogether. And honestly, it's in those times when we need him most. And so I'm like, well, while I'm cleaning out my clothing in my closet, I need to be doing the same thing with my spiritual closet, because I just feel like throughout the year, it's been filled with some junk, if I can be honest, like by things that I've listened to, by people that I've listened to. That's a whole nother episode right there, listening to the wrong people and allowing them to try to persuade you to do things that they want you to do instead of what God wants you to do. But it's kind of like just reevaluating things that I've kind of let get in my way, like in between me and God. This summer was like really rough because I was just all over the place. I had so many things going on, and it's like I didn't have any days of rest. Like there wasn't any day of the week where I can say, okay, I'm going to relax today. I was just so busy and caught up, and I took a break from producing podcasts because I couldn't sit still long enough to even write out great content. So it's like I kind of like wasn't talking to God, and I've stated before, I want this podcast to be his platform and not mine. But if I'm not talking to him, the CEO of my life, then I'm not going to get any direction or clarity on what it is that I need to be bringing to you all. So I didn't want to, be putting out any empty messages or anything like that. So I just had to take a break and just like really be still. And I think for many of us, that will be so transformational in our life if we just sometimes put down the phone. As much as I love to listen to a great sermon or a great word and other podcasts and worship music, I do know, I won't sit here and lie that I don't get distracted when I do that. Like I was listening to a podcast earlier, and do you know the entire time I thought I was listening, but I was scrolling on Instagram the entire time, reading about what other folks have going on. And let me not even get on the topic of Facebook. That's just like high school drama times 10,000. It's like, I don't need any drama in my own life because I'm constantly, reminded of what other people, the drama they have going on. So I was like, for the remainder of the year, not only am I going to allocate a day of rest, like one day per week where I just simply do nothing, like I take myself off of social media and all of that, but I'm also going to start being like strategic about how much time I spend on social media on any other given day or in my phone in general. Like I've even found myself like on date night, I'll just be so in tune with my phone that I'm not really living in the present moment, like with my husband and enjoying the moment. So I'm like, okay, I have plenty of books that has great words. If I need to be spiritually filled, instead of, getting on my phone and going to YouTube or Apple Podcast or whatever it is, I'm going to pick up that book and I'm going to sit my phone down. So I want to challenge you all to do that as well, because like today I was doing that and it's just so, I don't know, I just feel free in a way. I don't know how to explain it, but it's a great feeling. So it's something that I'm really going to start doing, especially as we wrap up this year, and I really start to create my goal list and create my action items and action plans for getting those things done in the new year. I don't want it to be affected by or distracted by anything that I'm seeing on social media, but I just want to make sure that it's God I'm hearing from and not anyone else. So, in my episode, Pressure Produces Diamonds, by the way, if you have not listened to that yet, I would encourage you to press pause here and go and listen to that, and then you can resume this episode. But in that episode in particular, I talked about how we oftentimes like brush stuff in our life under the rug, thinking like, oh, just treating it as a quick fix and really like just saying, I'm not dealing with this. I'll deal with it later. But the more you sweep things under the rug without really dealing with them, you'll end up falling face forward on those, tripping up on those things. And you just don't want to do that. And so as we're cleaning up, and this can be applied in many different aspects, spiritually, physically, you name it, but apply it however you see fit. But whatever that, while we're doing our cleaning, I'd encourage you not to like look at it as a quick fix, but really deal with the things, the messes that you've made in your life. And instead of just sweeping them under the rug, deal with them for what they are. I think that, it's just a danger of like not dealing with things in the moment and just saying to yourself, oh, I'll deal with that later. It's really not that big of an issue. It's just not good. And so I think that a lot of times we don't want to deal with things, and it's as a result of like a heart issue. So the first area of, a life cleanse, this whole life seasonal cleanse that I want to talk about is asking God to cleanse your heart so that you can become spiritually healthy. Heart issues are the root of all other issues. So I think that it's very, very, very important for us to ask God to search our heart. I remember when I first started going to the church that I attend now, he had one of the first sermons that I ever heard from the pastor was about how to pray. And he was, there's no cookie cutter way of how you should pray. But I know for a lot of people, they say, oh, I want to pray, I just don't know how to pray. So he like gave us like a great framework on how we should talk to God. And it should be very conversational, as if we're talking to our earthly father or whomever your father figure is in your life. And he was saying how one section, whatever, of your prayer time with God should be to ask him like to search your heart. And he said that we should ask God daily to break your heart of the things that break his heart. And I remember like I was thinking about it for a while, and I'm like, that's like, I don't know why it seemed like intimidating or scary for me at first to even say it. And so like I started to kind of like go back and read my sermon notes, re-listen to the sermon, and I just would get caught up at the fact like that I should ask God to break my heart of the things that break his heart. Because I'm thinking like, oh, like things are just going to start falling apart, and he's just going to reveal like these crazy things to me. And I remember as I started to like incorporate that into my daily prayer, like things started shifting, like relationships, friendships, like different things started to like, I don't know, reveal themselves differently. And I started to think like, wow, like if this is really God, shifting things around, what he's trying to tell me is that me being involved in this friendship or whatever is breaking his heart. So it's something about this situation that I'm blind to, but he's not. And I was just like, wow, like it was just crazy. But anyway, I would encourage you all to do the same, because from our heart flows the issues of life. So like I said, a lot of our issues, like all of our issues, start as heart issues. So if you have some bitterness, some unforgiveness, like you need to get down on your knees and just beg God to search your heart and break your heart of the things that break his heart. And I promise you, like I guarantee you, you will start to see things change. People will start to switch up on you. The list goes on and on and on. I know for me, it was a little scary at first because I'm like, well, I'm trying to like debate with God, like, oh, well, this person is acting weird and this friendship isn't going the way it was before. Like, I'm trying to like prove something. It's like as if I was trying to prove something to him. And he's like, no, like you asked for this. So here you have it. And I'm just so grateful, like looking back on those situations I'm referencing, I'm just so grateful that he revealed like people's true colors, like right on time, because as I actually started doing this, it was kind of like towards the end of the year. And I'm just so glad that I didn't take that baggage with me into a new year. I want you to think for a second about like your physical heart and how we have arteries, which are essentially like vessels to transport blood to our heart. If you know anyone with like heart issues, cholesterol issues, things of that nature, oftentimes when people have those issues, it's because of clogged arteries. So if your arteries are supposed to be like a vessel to pump blood to your heart, when you have like buildup of bad stuff like that fatty stuff and cholesterol, I'm not a medical person or whatever, but I do know, I do know the basics. So a lot of times when you have clogged arteries and it causes those heart problems or different heart conditions, it's because you've allowed the bad stuff to just get cluttered in there. It's because of, poor diet, things of that nature. And it kind of like stifles your heart's like function, and it can result in heart attack, stroke, and sometimes even death. If you think about it from a spiritual perspective, the same is true in your walk with God. So if you have all of this junk, as I referenced earlier, like feeding your spirit, and you're not feeding your spirit with the things that you should, it's going to be hard for God to get through to you. We are, as believers, we are called to be vessels for God. Our vessels, our lives aren't going to be as effective if those vessels, the arteries are clogged with junk. So if we aren't spending time with him, if we aren't sitting still, if we aren't hanging out with the right people, if we're listening to bad music, and I'll say this right now, I love Cardi B, but I can't be listening to her every day. Like when I listen to her, it's like in a moment, especially if I'm at work and I'm doing something like really time consuming, sometimes it'll give that upbeat, the upbeat music does something to me. It just gives me like this whole crazy work ethic. But I realized like, oh, you say you're listening to Cardi just to get your work done. But when I leave work, I find myself like those lyrics replaying, and it's sometimes stuff that shouldn't be on replay in my head. But that's just an example of how like the bad stuff can like get in your way. And everyone is different. So your life may look a little different. The things that I may deem bad for me may look different for you. But what I'm trying to say is, if we're supposed to be vessels for God, but the vessel, which is us, is clogged up, we're not going to be as effective and, really walk in the purpose and plan that God has for us. So in the same way, a doctor may tell a person who has cardiovascular issues that they need to change their diet, they need to work out more, they need to make these like lifestyle changes in order to have a healthy heart again. The same is true for us. We need to start changing like the situations that we put ourselves in. We need to start changing the people that we hang out with. We need to start changing how we start our day. We need to start changing how we talk to people. The list can go on and on and on, but we have to be intentional about the things that need to change in order for us to not be a clogged vessel. Like, just think about it. If I don't think any of us like intentionally plans to be a failure or ineffective or just plain old lazy, but you have to think about it. Like, if God wants to, and he wants to do great things for all of us in and through all of us, like he wants us to just be great. But if he can't get through to us, like, God is a gentleman. He's not going to be rude and keep like trying to tug you along. Like, he's a gentleman. So he's going to wait for you. Like, yes, he's full of great miracles and he can make a way and he can do all of these things, but we have to provide the muscle. Like, we can't just think that he's going to do everything for us on our time. It just doesn't work that way. So I'd also encourage you all, in addition to putting that phone down sometimes, I'm talking to myself too, but I also encourage you all to really sit before God and just ask him to search your heart. I'm trying to tell you, it's going to be a little life changing. Some things are going to start happening, and I think it'll just be great revelation for you. But in addition to that, I just think that you should start kind of evaluating unhealthy situations and unhealthy like lifestyles, things that we do on a daily that just aren't conducive to a great heart spiritually. I'll be right back after this message. Hello, Yellow Room family. Today's episode was brought to you by Anchor. I chose Anchor as my podcast host because it is, in fact, the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor gives me everything I need in one place for free, which you can use right from your phone or computer. In fact, this episode was created and edited right from my mobile device. Anchor's creation tools allow me to record and edit my podcast on the go to make it sound great. They even distributed my podcast for me so that it can be heard on all platforms, to include Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. For more information, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. The next thing that we should be deep cleaning is our mouth. Like, yes, you should do this. You should clean your mouth every single day, twice a day. I definitely encourage that. But you really need to be looking at what comes out of your mouth. Like, what do you say to others? I do think that cleansing your heart is a prerequisite for this, because as you start to search and cleanse your heart, your language will also be affected. So I'm not just talking about like having a potty mouth or anything like that, but I'm saying like those negative, like pessimistic thoughts. Like, you really need to be mindful of what leaves your mouth. Like, the Bible reminds us that life and death lies in the power of your tongue. And I don't care how much you think that you're just joking around or anything like that. Like, the devil is always listening. He's always trying to plot and just listening out for ways that he can tempt you. So it's very important that we kind of guard our tongue. I know for me, this is something that I'm working through, and it's a challenge because I've always been like very strong-willed and outspoken. And if I feel a certain way, I like to make sure that people know how I feel. And sometimes it's been a slap in my face, like, because I found myself in situations where I'm just like, you shouldn't have opened your mouth, or you should have at least thought about what you were going to say before you actually say it. So I just think that we need to be mindful of the negative talk, the pessimistic thoughts, and anything that, that you're saying or even thinking that contradicts the word of God or your faith, that compromises your faith. And with this, I think another good thing is to be mindful of complaining. I know for me, it's like it was one morning I heard a sermon on like complaining and stuff like that. And it's crazy because the pastor of this sermon was pretty much saying that, like, if you're a habitual complainer, and I would definitely say that I was, you don't even notice that you're complaining most of the time because it's just like second nature. And so it's like, especially if you have like a group of people that you usually do your complaining with, when you see them and you link up with them, this is just y'all. Like, you don't think that, oh, I'm doing something bad. And I think that it's really like you have to watch too, because I know, like, even in the workplace, if I'm having a bad day or my boss did something I don't like it's usually a group of us who at lunch we would just vent, and it's just like, wow. Like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, like, it's not okay to talk to people and like have that, people who you can confide in. I just think that a lot of times it's how it's said and how it's done. So, like, not throwing a pity party with your friends. Like, yes, get it out. Like, let's talk about what's not working. Let's talk about how what this person did was not okay. But also, let's talk about how we can help that particular person, or help that, like, pretty much bring life to awful situations. So I like to always be mindful now. If I'm meeting with my boss or anyone in work or outside of work, if they ask me for my, opinion on how we can do things better or what's not working, I like to be mindful that as I'm creating this list of things that aren't working, obviously, if I've thought about it long enough, in my mind, I should have the ability to offer a solution to the problem. Like, before I fix my face to complain about something, I need to ask myself how I can make things better. A good thing to really start doing is to really speak life over people's situations. So doing your daily prayer, you need to start like having a list of affirmations. So a part of my prayer is to really start it out by letting God know like why I'm grateful, so if I'm grouchy in the morning and, in my mind, I'm just like, oh my God, I hate that I have to get up so early. I don't want to go into work. I start turning those into like positive statements to God. So God, I thank you that I have a job that I get to go to early this morning. I thank you that I have, like, sometimes I have to stop and get gas in the morning. God, I thank you that I have a car that I get to put gas in the first place. And when I say those things out loud, it really shifts my perspective. So instead of me complaining about things that I have to do, it's almost as if, okay, those things aren't obligations. I'm just grateful that I have the opportunity to do these things because someone somewhere don't have the same luxuries in life that I do. So I really need to start like saying things aloud to shift my perspective and just be grateful for the things that I do have and the things that I get to do. So even when your friends are talking to you, coworkers are talking to you, family is talking to you, and they're kind of like, maybe they're pessimistic people. Maybe you need to be, God's placed you in their life for you to be a light. So yes, they can speak to all of these dark things, but God has called us to be the light in those situations. So if you have a friend who's always complaining, just start speaking life over their situation. Like, oh, you're better than that. Or encourage them to start being the catalyst for change in their workplace, in their home, in their lives, like wherever they go. Because a lot of time, I mean, if we sit around and we put so much effort into talking bad about people or situations, we could take that same, time that we can take the same amount of time to fuel passion and to be a change. Like, so if we're tired of seeing something done a certain way, how about we be the change that we want to see? If you want your boss to treat you better, how about you start by treating them like they're gold? Like, start by praying for them. That was a big step in my prayer life. Like, there's people that I don't necessarily like and that I don't necessarily enjoy working with, but if I start saying their names in my prayer, it changes my heart towards them. I don't know. It's just weird. But like, or that ex that ex or old friend that you just don't like anymore, like, or you just can't stand the thought of, start praying for them and watch how God changes things, and watch how your heart like softens towards them. The last area that we need to pay close attention to and that we really need to cleanse is the area of our mind. Like, we need to be focused on renewing our mind. And this is one of the biggest areas of struggle for most of us, removing the garbage from our minds. In the Pressure Produces Diamond episode, I want to say, again, if you have not listened to that, please go and listen to it now. Well, you're at towards the end of this episode. Listen to it right after you listen to this. But I was talking about the whole concept of garbage in, garbage out. Sometimes we have to, well, not sometimes, all the time, we need to, the same way we take the garbage out of our homes, we need to do the same thing with our minds. Like, we really need to be releasing all of that negativity and just the stuff that's really not good. Like, it doesn't deserve any storage in our heads. Like, we just need to throw it all out. And I think that a lot of times if we think about the things that I've been discussing, so searching your heart and really releasing those impurities and those toxins from our hearts, like, that will then affect our language. So a lot of times we will say things and speak things over our lives and other lives, and then in turn we start to start setting our minds on that, and it just can become a very dangerous and vicious cycle if we aren't careful. So, let's say, for an example, a lot of the things that you set out and you plan to do this year, they didn't go the way that you wanted them to go. And so now you're just, telling yourself, you're speaking these bad things. You're telling yourself that you're a failure and you can never stay focused and you just can't do anything right? You're saying these things, or in worst cases, you have someone saying these things to you. So now this becomes a part of your mindset, and it stifles you. Like, it hinders you from really pursuing greatness. And just because things didn't go the way they should have gone, or you wish that they would have gone, does not mean that you're just, stuck or you can't get beyond this. Think of Einstein. He's like the genius, the ultimate genius. He had like learning disabilities. Like, he had educational setbacks, but that was like breeding ground for him. Like, think about your setbacks or your detours, right? Think about them as training ground for the person who you're about to blossom and flourish to be. So, I talk a lot about perseverance and, bouncing back from bad, like troubling and hard times, and how God, if he can't trust us with a little, in those little tests, and he can't trust us with those, why would he give us something bigger or allow us to, take on something bigger if we really haven't grasped what it really means to navigate hard times? So I think that we should really be, as we wrap this year up, we should really be resetting and refocusing our minds on the right things. In order to really rid our minds of the garbage that this world feeds it, we really need to start spending more time in God's word and around people who are life-giving. We really need to start feeding our minds and spirits with the word of God instead of the garbage of this world. And this goes back to what I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, is putting down our phones. So a lot of times we are on, social media, and all of us, we don't all follow godly people or people who exude like characteristics and traits that we would deem godly or who we want to really be. But yet we find ourselves comparing ourselves to these very people who are not really pursuing the same things that we are. So I think that, I've said before, to really start your day on a high note, like start spending. There's so many podcasts now, like most churches have podcasts. There are so many great thought leaders who have podcasts. There's great podcasts, like probably people in your local community who have podcasts. Like start your day off with feeding your spirit. Like it's hungry. It's hungry every single day. And for all of the bad things that are going on in the world and that we're exposed to, we have to have something to counter that and to kind of offset the bad stuff. So we need to constantly be thinking about what we're feeding our spirit through, like the music we listen to. Again, I said I love Cardi B and I love some of the City Girls songs too, but I know I can't be listening to that all day, every day, because whether I try to say, oh, it doesn't affect me, yes, it does, because I can listen to a Cardi B song or City Girl, whatever the name is, City Girl song, and I could be ready to fight somebody in my head. And I'm just like, no, like it's the music I'm listening to. It really does matter. So I just want us all to kind of like really start being conscious of what we allow into our space. And, as we start to close out this year on a high note, because I'm praying that we all do, everyone under the sound of my voice, I just really hope that we start making room for things that matter most in our life. If you feel that you're in one-sided relationships, friendships, any of that stuff, you really, 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 really need to sit down with yourself and come up with the exit strategy. Like you can't take those things into the new year, especially if you want a different outcome from this year. I'm not saying to just up and write people off and, just stop caring for them. You can love people at a distance. Trust me. You don't have to, someone doesn't have to be really involved in your life, or you don't have to be involved in their life for them to really know that you love them and you care for them. Like you can still pray for them. There's many different things, but some people just don't deserve all of your time and your energy. You need to place people in your life who are really going to be life-giving for you and who have your best interests at heart. There are so many selfish people in this world. And as I said, like for God to start like breaking my heart of the things that break his heart, he reveals so many selfish desires and people that I thought really meant a lot to me. But again, that can be a whole nother episode in itself. But like to really spend your time with the things and people that matter most. I really hope that today's episode was very, what's the word I'm trying to say? Like eye-opening. That's it. It was eye-opening for you, and that you'll really consider taking these things that I've discussed today into consideration. Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode. If you are new here, please consider subscribing on whatever platform you're listening in on today. Leave me a rating, leave me a review, comment, whatever you feel that you want to do. If you already consider yourself a part of the Yellow Room family, please consider making a small monthly donation to sustain and contribute to my growing platform. No amount is too small. Donations can be made at anchor.fm/theyellowroom/support. If you are unable to, I still love you just the same. You can still support me by listening, sharing, and providing feedback. I thank you all so much, and I appreciate your continued listenership. Thank you.